Thank you all for joining us. We're from Climate and Power, and one of the central topics we've been discussing in class is trying to understand why the US has made so little progress in combating climate change. This boils down to a lot of reasons, including the libertarian free market, the rise of climate denialists, the control the natural resource companies have over US policy. So lots of people have understandably adopted attitudes of climate existentialism in the US. So we were interested in studying alternative approaches to climate change resistance.
So as part of our final project, we wanted to study cultural and economic models that contrast our current landscape of deregulation and corporate control. And this led us to Bhutan. For the audience, Bhutan is a Himalayan country known for their progressive environmental and economic policy. And in our initial research, we found a few notable things that we want to highlight. The first being the constitutional forest mandate, where 60% of land is preserved under forest cover. The second is their use of the Gross National Happiness Index as a measure of well-being. And the third is the influence of Buddhism in their treatment of nature. But we really just wanted to learn more about how sustainability manifests itself through these three facets and everyday life.
Today, we've invited 5 speakers from Bhutan to share their thoughts and experiences. Each of our speakers will tell a little bit about themselves. We'll have a few questions pertaining to our studies on sustainability and the intersections with environmental policy, global national happiness, and Buddhism. So first, we'd like to introduce Dr. Lola Phuntsho. He was a monk both in Bhutan and India. He later studied in Oxford, receiving his doctorate in Buddhist studies in 2003. He's done research at Cambridge University and the University of Virginia. In 2000, Dr. Phuntsho founded the Lola Foundation, focusing on education, entrepreneurship, and the preservation of traditional Bhutanese culture. And more recently, Dr. Phuntsho also authored The History of Bhutan, which is the first comprehensive chronicle of the kingdom's history written in English. Dr. Phuntsho, it's an honor to have you here on this panel, and thank you for being here. So our first question, you've had the rare opportunity to pursue high-level education in both monastic and Western academic settings. How do these experiences shape you into who you are and the work that you've done today? Dr. Phuntsho, I think you might be muted.
Sorry, apologies. Can you please repeat the question?
Of course. You've had the rare opportunity to pursue high-level education in both monastic and Western academic settings. How did these experiences shape you into who you are and the work that you do today?
Thank you, and good evening to all of you. Yes, I do have rather different, I would say, maybe not necessarily unique educational background from most of the other people, particularly here in this meeting. And I would say the two different educational background I have been very complementary. In some cases, yes, people question about how modern academic study, that's very scientific and critical in approach, can go together with a faith-based monastic education. But in the case of Buddhism is very much grounded in rationality and critical inquiry. So it has not been a major challenge to bring the two together. But then what was much more advantageous is both the Buddhist monastic training I had and the modern Western academic training, they both shared this very open approach, very progressive sort of approach to. So I would say the two different educational trainings I had have definitely enriched my life, and it's probably that unique part that I've also got to share a bit with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Dr. Phuntsho. We're now going to introduce our next panelist, Sangay Dorji. Sangay Dorji previously worked in the Department of Agriculture, Ministry in Agriculture and Forests in Bhutan. He is now currently working as a freelance consultant in agriculture and the environment. Sangay researches agriculture, climate change, sustainable development, geographic information systems, vertical farming, natural resource management, and human wildlife conflict management. He has a degree in agronomy from the University of the Philippines and University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He also received a master's degree in environmental management at Yale University in 2015. So Sangay, it is an honor to have you here today. With your vast experience, could you share a bit about your time working in the Department of Agriculture and your recent work in agriculture and sustainable development?
Thank you. I think things got a little bit mixed up. There are a lot of Sangay Dorjis in Bhutan, so the other Sangay Dorji, I think the two CVs got mixed up a little bit. But anyhow, to take off, I've been involved with the agriculture sector as well, more specifically working with young people. A couple of years ago, I'm sure Farmer Sangay will talk about it as well. So we started off a cooperative with young people, really trying to integrate food systems and really trying to understand the flow of food and the origin of food. Overall, in Bhutan, we still a lot of challenges when it comes to the agriculture system, a lot of land fragmentation issues. But however, I think, again, going back to the idea of growing up in a Buddhist country, getting Western training. So the experience has been indigenously, I think historically, if you go back, look at smaller communities and how people lived, food systems were much more sustainable. Since development came in and the country started moving into a more modernized phase since the 70s, there's been a lot more import of food. Definitely, if you come to Bhutan right now, you're going to have much more options. I remember growing up in the 80s where going into a shop meant maybe looking at 2 or 3 brands, but now Thimphu has also become pretty much like any other country. You go into a supermarket and you're going to encounter maybe 50, 60 brands. And within all of these brand wars and consumerism, there's still a lot of challenges. Bhutanese people, young people specifically, now moving away from healthier food systems, more sustainable food systems to more packaged goods. Ultra processed food is becoming an issue. When it comes to behavior and consumption, we are also struggling with statistics which relate to increasing obesity in young people. Fast food culture is picking up. Of course, we still do not have a McDonald's in Bhutan, but well, we're now on the global platform and there is a lot of pressure on food systems. However, in Bhutan, considering GNH and all of the frameworks and sustainability being at its core, there is a lot of policies and movement to get more sustainable. However, it still remains a challenge. I think one of the good things about consumerism is that it does expose you to a lot of things. However, at that same time, there are a lot of carbon loading factors because of the food system, a lot of import dependency, and it's a struggle that we're still encountering. Personally, myself, as an individual, after my environmental training, it's been more about trying to consume less. Even if I do consume, I try to be more sustainable. I try to cook at least 2 meals a day at home and keeps me healthier. Also keeps my environmental loading lower. So it's a challenge here in Bhutan as well. I think origin of food and who's growing our food is a big concern, and that's something that the country is challenged with and trying to overcome as well. We do have national programs on going organic. We've started organic certification processes. However, these still remain a challenge, but the hope is that we're able to resolve this by engaging all of the various stakeholders, even including the business sector. So I think that's where currently agriculture and food systems stand as of now in Bhutan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction and apologies for the mix-up. We now want to introduce Farmer Sangay. He is an agrarian and a moral philosopher who worked in the Ministry of Agriculture as a regulator for 4 years before becoming a farmer and teaching traditional cultivation techniques. So Farmer Sangay also has a very large following on Facebook and has become an advocate for and promoter of agrarian life and farming. So in a previous interview with Radio Valley, you commented that Bhutanese people are more influenced by nature than Buddhism or any other concept. So what does nature mean to you and how do you see it as a driving force in your own life?
Oh,
Megan, I think he didn't hear the question, maybe?
Yeah, we can repeat that. I think, yeah, go.
Yeah, we were just, we heard you in like a past interview comment that Bhutanese people are more influenced by nature than Buddhism or any other concept. So we were just wondering what nature means to you and how you see it as a driving force in your own life.
oh, okay. So, good evening there and good morning. I mother making her daily morning incense offering to the spirit of the land and the deities around the mountains here you can see. And this is my small family farmhouse. And also this is my small family farm you can see here. And to begin with, I would say that to me, being I was born here in this small house, and I was raised here, and after maybe my mid-20s, I have traveled out of my community here to work for government and a couple of projects. And then I'm back here for good with my family and reunited, and I'm being in this nature for last 2 years for good. And I would say that nature for me is like my kind of happy place. Or I can say nature, going into woods, being in this nature is like being in a temple, you know, where it brings me to the core of my being, and it helps me to be the awareness in my body, awareness in my mind, and it helps me to be in a space where I can pursue what I want to be in my everyday life. But to really attend to your like the crust of the question, I would say that for me, being a farmer has been like a connection to nature. Farming to me is also like a bridge that unites the essence and the quintessence of the nature, and then what we aspire as a human being, and our innate ability to pursue our higher goals and higher human potentials. And in that context, you know, in last my whole life, I have been engaged into agriculture. Agriculture has been the mother of all the culture that I have seen in the world, and also the kind of thoughts that I have in my mind. And that is what agriculture and nature has been so intricately connected, I would say. And how nature has helped me and my family is also that whatever we do here on the farm, I think we are pretty much learned everything from nature. And also in everyday life, in a year, let's say, we would draw about more than 50% of our food basket from the forest around. In all these forests, you can see we have so many ferns, we have so many berries, we have so many oil tree berries that for now we would say that we have to really depend on the market force for salt. And also because of the modern development, so many changes have happened in our country, and also it has brought in a lot of changes in our livelihood, and therefore we now have to depend much more than it used to be in the past. But still, I came to learn last year that if we have a salt here on the farm, then we are pretty much self-sufficient. And living a very self-sufficient life actually allows humans to really pursue what I call it the inner peace. And that inner peace can be attained through many methods. But to me personally, I would say having a very harmonic relationship with nature around definitely gives that inner joy, which is very self-sustained over a time. And in my own personal experience, even if I go out of nature, out of my village, go to some cities in town with all the hustle bustle, there is still that connection I can see in between the breathe out and breathe in. There's always that intricate relationship. I am very grounded on the ground, and it always gives me a lot of emotional stability, in a lot of harmony within myself. And that is where I am in right now, you know. And also I learned from nature that there are many factors like to pursue a happier and a good well-being life. One thing is relationship to nature. The other thing is relationship to the humans, and the other thing is the relationship to self. And I think both of the self and the people also is way easier once we understand and is in harmonic connection with, in sync with the natural flow, the environment around, and having a maybe a right attitude with how we approach and how we see the nature around us. That's how I would say. Yeah, thank you for now.
Thank you so much, Farmer Sangay, for that introduction and for showing us your beautiful farm. We want to introduce our next panelist, which is Nedup Tshering. He is the executive director of Clean Bhutan, a non-governmental organization with a vision for a waste-free society in Bhutan by 2030. Clean Bhutan seeks to encourage citizens to practice a sustainable consumption lifestyle and push government and municipal authorities to manage waste more effectively. Nedup has been particularly influential in advocating for the development of a strong waste management system and previously studied in the Australian National University. So Nedup, could you please tell us a little bit about the work that Clean Bhutan is doing? And we also love to learn more about your work in waste management and how Clean Bhutan has been responding to the privatized waste management system.
Sorry, I think you're muted. Well, I know.
Sorry. Good evening, everybody, and nice to meet you all. It's been a pleasure to come to this plenary session, and I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about, but waste management is a problem with the world, I think, all across the world. And here in Bhutan, we just began modernization in the early 70s. So, and then the problem has been escalating since then. So I started my career with the National Environment Commission. That is the first environment office that was established in 1991 in Bhutan. And since then, I've been working on environment. Then after I retired from the government, I worked as I thought waste management is a very important issue. So I've been working since then. So it's been a pleasure working with my colleagues on waste management, but it's been a challenge too. So I think it's a challenge across the world on this waste management problems. So I will leave this open-ended thing issue so that we can respond later on this. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Our final speaker is Dawa Yoezer, who I met a few years back when I visited Bhutan. Dawa is a leading tour guide and worked in the tourism industry since 2014. Throughout his career, Dawa has forged connections with countless people in Bhutan and is a known figure. He is also one of the most energetic and fun-loving people I know. So give it up and let's welcome Dawa, our fifth panelist. My question for Dawa, in 2008, we saw Bhutan's tourism policy change from high value, low volume to high value, low impact model, focusing more towards sustainable tourism. Obviously, you started your career after that change. When we were curious, we'd love to hear some of your experiences as a tour guide. And if you kind of felt the recent push in the last few years towards more sustainable tourism experience.
Yes, sorry to disturb you, but I did not get the question because you were.
We can send it over text. I think the audio, there's a little bit of echo when we talk. You might have got it by text.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dawa Yoezer. I used to be a tour guide, but now I haven't decided to go back to tour guide or still do the tour guide. But right now I'm working as a manager for a phone company in Bhutan, but still planning to go back to guiding when the tourism comes back like the same that we used to have before. Before, when I was a tour guide, we used to have lots of tourists coming in. But now, since like because of the current scenario, we have increased the Sustainable Development Fund in the country. So that's why we are having less number. So I thought it's better not to go back in guiding as of now, just to stay steady and work somewhere. But my passion has always been in guiding, and can't think of not doing guiding anymore. And because of the topic itself is sustainable, I have to sustain myself in the downtown of Bhutan. So that's why I have to work somewhere else instead of leaving my passion. And the question that Jesse asked, we would love to hear about your experience as a tour guide. Happy birthday. Okay, thank you for the question, Jesse. My experience as a tour guide, like I said before, my passion was always in guiding, meeting new people, like the guys who are all sitting down there may not be knowing what kind of guy I am right now. But when you come with me in Bhutan, you'll feel like Bhutan is completely different from my point of view. And you will enjoy the Bhutan, not in your way, but how I will show you what Bhutan is. So that is what makes me different from all the tour guides in the country. And my experience always been good, enjoyable. I had lots of emotional connection with many people. But now I can't have that kind of emotion anymore because I have to work, eat in the downtown. So that's why I have to stop my passions for right now. But in future, when the country gets back to tourism and there will be many people coming in, I will be going back to guiding. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again so much for the introduction, Dawa. Now we're gonna have a few questions for all of our panel participants to answer. You can just unmute and you can answer freely. So our first question can be very open-ended. Bhutan has implemented a very progressive environmental policy compared to almost every other nation on earth. What do you think are the main factors that led to Bhutan's progressive approach in environmental policy?
Uh, just to break the floor, maybe I'll take this on. Hello, Nedup, would you like to take this up?
Sorry, so I know there's an echo, but we also sent the question in chat so you can read it and understand it more fully. But it's open to any of you guys. If any of you want to answer it, please feel welcome.
Maybe I'll just add on to it. I'm not an expert on environment policy, but since I've been working since 1991 with the National Environment Commission in the Royal Government of Bhutan, and the policy in environment policy in Bhutan is absolutely very good. And also, I think with the vision of their majesties, who said that we should protect, we should have all times forest cover more than 60%. And that has been a very good environment policy, because it's one of the very fundamental area where we need to protect it, because we really, everybody is not sure what is the problem. But then we know in the, I think Dr. Karma will say in the Buddhist philosophy, we also work with the nature, we live with the nature, and that's, we are part of the nature. So I think Bhutan has come to an approach in that philosophy. So I think Dr. Karma will be able to give us a more insight in the Buddhism and with the government environmental policy, because we are interdependent. So that is my, that's what I would say.
Yes. If I may just chip in and add to what Nedup has just shared. I think when we look at policies and legislations and rules, regulations, these come as a product of our societal thinking, the societal ethos, the worldview we have, the mindset we have, the belief systems we have. And as Farmer Sangay has shared, as Nedup has shared, if you go into Bhutan's sort of cultural makeup, then nature plays a very, very important, a fundamental role. The pre-Buddhist worldview is very deeply embedded in our respect for nature. And then we have the second tier of our cultural makeup, which is Buddhism, which comes in to sort of supplement the respect for nature we already had before Buddhism. So these two factors definitely has built a very strong culture here in Bhutan of looking at environment with awe, with respect, and trying to build a harmonious relationship with nature. And I think these cultural beliefs and practices that we had in relationship with nature becomes then expressed through state policies. And in fact, when we talk about not only the 60% forest coverage for all times, but also over 50% of the country being protected areas. And you, as students of religion and sustainability and environment in the States, would know that the national park tradition has started in the US. But I often say that while we didn't use the term national park, particularly the English term, we in fact had a similar and much more older tradition here. And even today, if you travel across Bhutan, there are many places where you cannot get into a mountain area or into a valley for that very critical period of very fertile period of the summer. So there's a practice called rhythm, mountain closures, ladam, pass closures, where the entire area is restricted from entry of any sort of humans, particularly people who are not locals. So that kind of cultural belief system in the sanctity of the area helped, I think, protect the pristine environment we have. And that cultural ethos is getting expressed through new policies and legislation. So it really boils down to the general cultural ethos we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those responses, and thank you, Dr. Phuntsho, for bringing up Buddhism. For our next question, we were actually wondering if you could speak on Buddhism in Bhutan and how it influences perspectives and education regarding conservation and sustainability. So if anyone wants to speak to that, that would be lovely. Thank you.
My colleagues may want to chip in, but as a Buddhist scholar, let me start. I mean, there is so much to say about Buddhism and environment and nature. So this platform won't be sufficient to get into all the details. But in general, when we look at Bhutan's case in particular, what we have is firstly this pre-Buddhist respect for nature. Nature being a living organism. So one of the things that we still have intact to a large extent is the belief in mountain deities, river spirits, forests, gods, and so forth, which has helped people fear and respect nature even before Buddhism came in. And then Buddhism comes in to reinforce that by bringing the concept of interconnectedness, the interdependence of all life forms. So in addition to the visible life forms such as human beings, insects, birds, fishes, and so forth, you have also many invisible, non-human spirits. The Buddhist sort of spiritual taxonomy, there are so many kinds of such spirits, and we have to relate to them in very specific ways. So Buddhism certainly helped reinforce that connection through this concept of interdependence, and interdependence or dependent arising, you must have already learned in your class on religion, is the hallmark philosophy of the Buddha. And then that interdependence leads on to this moral value of practicing loving kindness and compassion, of the concept of law of cause and effect, karma. So all these value systems actually help Bhutan sort of sustain the very strong, pristine environment we had, and in fact build further. And even beyond that, you have the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition, which comes in, where natural landscapes become very powerful spots for spiritual transformation. So in Bhutan, you'll find so many sacred cliffs and mountains and valleys and ne sites, they're called power spots. So Buddhism has definitely contributed a great deal to sustain Bhutan's environment.
And Dr. Karma, before other people chime in, I was curious, do you see this translate to social policies, like healthcare and other policies? Wow.
Did you say healthcare?
Yes, I was wondering if you see the ideas of Buddhism translate into other aspects of policy. I think Maggie just chimed in.
Well, Buddhism permeates all aspects of Bhutanese life. So it does manifest in healthcare, in education, in almost all aspects of an individual's life, in public affairs. So yes, I would say a lot of the development policies in Bhutan are, if not inspired, at least taking into consideration the Buddhist values we already have. But then one must also accept the situation we are in right now, with this intense globalization and a lot of information coming from outside, the force of materialism. These things are becoming very, very big challenges to Bhutanese and the Buddhist value system here. So there is indeed more need for Buddhist sort of education in the mainstream education system, more Buddhist values to come down to social sectors, and particularly in the society. I think the society as a whole is right now very strongly driven by modern sort of materialistic, consumerist values.
Maybe, okay, sorry. Maybe I could add on to it. When it comes to waste management, we also look at it from the Buddhist perspective, because today we have become very materialistic society and very consumeristic society, and that has brought into a lot of problems and issues that is affecting the environment. Like, we buy a lot of things and then we have a lot of wastages, and it goes to the landfill and it impacts the environment, local environment, and overall environment in that perspective. So these are some of the things we really need to understand. Like Dr. Karma says, that we need to instill ourselves in the Buddhist value of non-materialism. And that is a challenge for us here in Bhutan, because we have been so caught up with this Western kind of feeling that materialistic values are more important than social values or spiritual values. So these are some of the things we've been facing problem when we come to environment and waste management in this situation. Thank you.
If I may, to share from maybe non-Buddhist scholar perspective. So I grew up in the 80s, basically trained under the British education system that was a legacy of India and what happened in Asia after before the Second World War. So how I experienced education was Buddhism was given. I grew up in a Buddhist family, and so it was a very interesting experience, because I was going to school, learning about the scientific method, trying to access knowledge. Then on one front, at home, I'm growing up with certain practices and rituals which are very important. And these did not really emerge as questions within myself up until maybe I was in high school. After which I identified sometimes as an atheist, sometimes I decided to be an agnostic, which led me to really try and understand, okay, what's really happening. And over a period of time, I was fortunate enough to spend some time in Thailand. I lived in Thailand, Bangkok for 2 years, where I was studying investment banking. Really got to understand marketing and advertising and consumerism. Later on, I was doing some other work. I was fortunate enough again to get a scholarship to study environment at Yale. And while I was there, I had a wonderful opportunity of studying under a religious ecologist, John Grimm and Mary Evelyn Tucker. And their work really actually made me experience and re-identify with Buddhism again. I felt comfortable calling myself a Buddhist after that experience because like Dr. Karma was saying, interdependence is something that I think really stuck on to me growing up in a Buddhist household. But over a period of time, my education did try to compartmentalize and make me decision oriented and started sometimes narrowing how I'm seeing things. But when I was back at Yale, being introduced to ecosystem thinking really identified with this bridge between science and as a Buddhist, how I've experienced independence. And that has really allowed me to sometimes really be appreciative of growing up in a Buddhist family. Although I think when I was young, I did struggle with the idea of why do I even need to identify with a religion. I consider myself more of a spiritualist at this point of time. But I think in Bhutan, how Buddhism influences our everyday life is not really even very religious. I think most of us, you're going to meet a lot of philosophers in Bhutan because we constantly grow up talking a lot about death. We discuss a lot about impermanence. Does everyone understand it on the same page? Definitely not, but everyone's definitely spent more time, I think, thinking about attachment. We are constantly talking about letting go. Can we practice it? I think that's probably an individual experience. But for me, at times, I used to feel that science and what I believe do not match up. But over a period of time, ecosystem thinking, the breakthroughs that we are making in science, even reinterpreting how what we thought was a fact, I think it's really putting things into perspective personally for me. And as a Buddhist, I think what really mattered to me was having an open mind. And that's really allowed to, I think, bridge myself in the 21st century. Thank you.
So I can also come in very briefly here, just to again go back where this I have began a couple of minutes ago when I started. So Buddhism has been that bridge between even my ancestor, my family members, my my villages here, and then myself. You can see this incense. These leaves are cypress trees that has been planted here. You can see all around the farm, and my parents used to use them for many religious purpose. Like this definitely is this offering of a smoke is a morning one form of a ritual for most of the everyday Buddhists here in my village. But me, after going through my own personal experiences, I now call myself, like what Sangay said, I also see myself more like a spiritual ecologist than a very rigid religious person. Over a time, that has been my experience. But what I see these trees, planting much more than this tree now, is that these trees gives off oxygen, and I need that oxygen, and I give off carbon dioxide, and these trees and plants and all the nature here you can see needs what I give off. And there's this direct interconnectedness and the karma, or you can say how we are in the symphony of each other. And that's where I landed up seeing myself connected to almost everything around where I am. And there were times where I would go into nature, like what Dr. Phuntsho has said already, I go into nature, and there are many spots even here on my farm where I see there are, my ancestors call it the spirit of land, There were many energy spots, I would say. I would also call it the vortex or the gateway to nature, where once I am onto those spots and, inhaling the air and gets into the sync with nature, there were many personal bodily awareness and experiences which would give me a lot of healing powers. So for instance, last year when I I realized during the pandemic time when I was here, back from my city wonder life, I learned there were many traumas in my body because of the memories of time of growing up. And then being into nature, sinking into this has really greatly helped me cleanse off and heal much of my bodily pains also. And these things I cannot explain to my ancestors. You can see my brother-in-law, my sister here, most of them, they would only understand how to heal and to connect to nature only through the concept of Buddhism and the spirit of the land. But for me, as a modern, I call myself, like I said, the spiritual ecologist. I see that as me being a part of nature and seeing that spirit within me, the energy within me in all forms of life in nature. And that once I shift my perception of exploiting nature to being in harmony with nature, being myself a part of nature has been a great value that I would also say that I can relate to my parents, and parents can also appreciate me. And when I'm able to use some of the Buddhist terms to relate to them and to create this relationship has been a great sort of a family or a social or a very humanistic view of Buddhist value, also allowing like modern thoughts that I have to be in sync and to bring more harmony, more peace at family level, I would say. Yeah, so that's what I want to say for this particular session.
So we just wanted to say, now that we're almost running out of time, thank you all so much as panelists for taking the time to spend your morning with us today and join our panel. We also wanted to thank everyone here in the audience, as well as the history and religion departments for sponsoring this event. And our last question for you guys before we turn it to the audience to see if they have any questions is, reflecting on Bhutan's history, if the US wanted to make substantial progress towards combating climate change like Bhutan has, where do you think that we should start?
Okay, just to continue from where I started, and I'm in the flow. I would say in brief that personally, I would feel that in order for the whole world, not just the US or Bhutan or any other particular country, but as a humanity in 21st century, I think there is a huge need for a shift of our collective consciousness as a country, as a whole world. There's a need for a transformation in our perception of the world around us, which I would say in nature, and shifting that perception of seeing nature as a source of our life, source of our livelihood, source of our innate being, and seeing that as we as part of a nature is a necessary transformation, I would say. Because when I grew up, or with many people I have interacted so far, I learned that most people who are into the materialistic worldview, they would see the tree as a timber. And I would see tree as like being myself, and every tree for me is like a book, or it's like a poem or a music. If we really grasp into the depth of watching a tree, a standing tree, it is a whole world in itself. So being able to shift our consciousness from seeing nature as a source of our economy or source of our a monetary value, when we see nature as a part of us, and when we are into sync with that kind of a thought, I think many things people would experience, and I think that will shift the individual consciousness. And once that individual consciousness is being shifted in the policy making or important places, I think the collective consciousness can be easy to shift, because there would be a lot of public policies, a lot of the social movements happening. So I would say that I would urge that we have to recreate our relationship with nature from how we are now to how it used to be in the past, and yeah, that's how I see it, guys.
Just to give my own perspectives on this climate change issue, when we read a lot of articles on it, we are always looking for alternatives, that hydrogen or wind power or solar power, instead of using all these other energy forms. But I think more than looking at alternatives, I think we should change ourselves in order to prevent the climate change. That is what I feel. We are always looking for alternatives, energy in these issues. So I don't know where we are heading or what we are looking forward to. We are always looking for alternative energy. And I think it is important for us to change ourselves rather than allowing the climate to change. That is what I feel personally. I've been reading a lot of articles on it, and whenever we read articles on climate change, we are always looking for alternatives and to comfort of humans. I don't understand why we are looking for that. So I think we need to understand that we need to change our own living style so that the climate is brought to a standstill or whatever. We should not change about it. That's it's my personal feeling. Thank you.
Just to wrap things up, thank you very much again for taking time. Very interesting question, I think. But on a personal note and a personal experience is just like Nedup was sharing, like Farmer Sangay was sharing, maybe reframing and rethinking how we are making choices. I think like we have entered the Anthropocene. We are becoming a huge variable in what's happening to nature around us. So constantly, even for me as a person when I was in university, so we are constantly discussing problems of immigration. We are constantly discussing issues of energy insecurity. We are talking about all of these massive problems. And the constant sense to me was always, but isn't it so obvious that maybe we should not be pursuing unlimited growth? And maybe that's why we need to go back to our basic economics and rethink that, look, maybe we don't need to be pursuing unlimited growth, right? Or even if we do, really reframing how we are valuing things. But constantly, the struggle was always, okay, all right, so these problems are there. But eventually, when we are coming on the discussion table, maybe really going back and really rethinking about how we are making choices. And the root cause generally of all anthropogenic activities is human choices and human behavior. And of course, that is where a lot of the nature of the mind starts coming in. And sometimes that's a lot of Buddhism there. You guys are all religion students. So I'm excited for what you guys are going out into, because I think the world is reaching that very, at a pivotal point where I think we're all becoming global. I'm sitting here in Bhutan and I grew up in the 80s and we have caught up to the rest of the world right now. I'm able to communicate with you guys and share complex ideas. All of us are able to do that. And maybe it's a good thing. I'm actually very hopeful for where we have reached. I think we're at a place where every individual citizens, it's almost like a grassroots thing. Yeah? We have this big world. All of us are individuals there, and we are all at a capacity where, because of social media, it has really democratized how we interact, how we share information. But at that same time, we are battling fake news. So really going back as individuals, how are we reaching out to our own local community, how we are doing grassroots work, how we are contributing to that. I think that's probably where everyone as individuals can make a difference. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your thoughts. I think we have just a couple of questions from the audience, if that'd be all right.
It's time for one more.
Or would you guys have time for one more question?
Sure, yeah, I have a question. So it seems to be in the US, for politicians, it's hard for them to see how climate action and economics can coexist. So what are the main economic industries in Bhutan, and how do they kind of manage that balance between generating profit while also making sure like we're doing the best we can for fighting climate change as well?
I'll briefly respond to that. I'm not an economist per se. I don't understand the tensions between environment conservation and the economic development here, but we do see this expressed in so many different ways here. So we really have to understand that Bhutan is doing well in environment conservation, but it's also paying prices for it. As we speak, perhaps some of the farmers are just waking up in a small shed, guarding their fields from wildlife. Now there is serious sort of human wildlife conflict as a result of our very successful environment programs. We also, as we speak, face the challenge of youth unemployment. Our economy is very small and is not at the moment growing as expected. So a lot of people live in poverty. There's serious youth unemployment that's forcing a lot of our young people to leave the country in search of better opportunities abroad. So Bhutan is going through a lot of economic challenges, and some of that, although not directly, are indirectly linked to our efforts to preserve the environment. So it is a challenge, it's a work in progress, and we hope you'll be able to find a kind of a middle way, as the Buddhists would put it, where we can get a fairly good socio-economic development without having to lose the environment altogether.
Can I jump in for a very short, maybe last input for this session? Yeah, I'm also not an economist, or I have no insight whatsoever in the whole complex idea. But my personal journey last 2 years during the pandemic and now is that I learned there were major errors and difficulties that is imposing on everyday livelihood of a simple ordinary person like myself, or ordinary family, small families like my family here, you know. Therefore, we have decided this year that maybe for going forward for next 5 to 6 years, my family has to transform ourselves from being looking for an economic opportunity through farming to being a more self-sufficient and resilient first, and then maybe we can introduce more healthier way of approach of farming. And also we are rethinking about the dietary system at the family level, rethinking our food systems. And it's just a thought that I believe there would always be a crisis in the larger economic policies globally. But if we can think about changing and transforming some things at the family level, then family as a fundamental unit of all societies could actually bring a larger impact in the whole global world, where it will even have a potential to transform the policies and even nudge from the grassroots to the top level, where the rethinking can happen beyond the families. And that's where we are now rethinking about what kind of the food we need. For instance, as a lifestyle, Bhutanese, we were pretty much now our dietary system or our food habits are pretty much rice, which is also not very, very sustainable in terms of the water use, the mineral depletion, the leaching in the soil minerals, and the fertility of. And you know, it's not really a huge sustainable approach. Therefore, we are thinking about how can we reduce intake of three times of rice in a day to maybe 1 times of rice, and then 2 other meals we have to think about other like vegetables or fruits, or maybe soup, or maybe having some ingredients from the forest to you know, supplement our dietary system. And also I learned it has a lot of health benefits, and also our mental well-being as well. And just to end this, I would say that as my new thoughts as a spiritual ecologist, being in harmony with nature has also allowed me to look inside myself, and more every day I begin to understand the nature of my mind. And once I understand and get the glimpse of the nature of my own mind, I also have the harmonic view and attitude and the shift of perception to the collective people's behavior. And there's a lot of place where I see myself as being a part of a creator of a peace than a disruptor. And I wish you all a very best of luck in your endeavors and journey of life. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, particularly me, you know, joining from this farm. It has been an immense pleasure and an experience today. Thank you so much, guys.
If I can just chip in, this is still a problem here. I think politicians everywhere, regardless of their personal values, always struggle between making the the environmental choice or the social choice vis-a-vis the economic choice. Bhutan struggles with that as well. But just to share for information here, since it might be relevant, in 2018, Bhutan did try to hold some conferences on happiness in business, after which there was the development of a framework called the GNH for business certification, which can be accessed through the Center for Bhutan Studies website. So it was a certification tool to really assess businesses along the different dimensions of gross national happiness. It's still there. It's really built on the idea of stakeholder capitalism. And I think what's interesting right now is earlier I had spoken about pursuing unlimited growth and in how we are pursuing it. And at the World Economic Forum as well, stakeholder capitalism is now gaining momentum. And similarly, even in Japan, if you go and read about how capitalism is being redefined there, you're going to encounter public interest capitalism, and you're going to encounter concepts such as ethical capitalism. So I think, like I said, again, in the 21st century, we are really at that precipice where even different versions of capitalists are now willing to come on the table and talk about, okay, let's sit down, let's redefine this. Maybe we're just not looking at all of the players who are important. So really moving away from a shareholder way of thinking to a stakeholder way of thinking, and really considering that the two biggest stakeholders who are never represented and are invisible is society and the environment. And I think that's where a lot of opportunity lies. Just wanted to share that. I'll make sure I shared the link for GNH for business certification, so you guys can take a look. Good luck with everything. Thank you.